Good evening, and welcome to this Arts Month community conversation. I'm Jonathan Toman with the Cultural Office of the Pikes Peak region, and tonight we're excited to bring you Writing Strategies During Times of Crisis. This is the fifth of 8 community conversations that will take place throughout the month of October, and the first within Poetry, Prose, and Comedy Week of Arts Month. These community conversations, curated by local artists and arts leaders, will showcase a variety of timely and relevant topics within various arts sectors of the Pikes Peak region. Tonight, as I mentioned, that topic is writing strategies during times of crisis. We've had stellar moderators and panelists so far for each of these community conversations, and tonight is no different. Joining me now is writer and playwright, easy for me to say, Jenny Maloney. Hi, Jenny, how are you?
Hi, John. I'm good.
She's also our moderator for this evening. Jenny writes dark fiction that her mother hates. She holds a BA in creative writing from CSU Pueblo. Her work has been published internationally and has appeared or is forthcoming in Pantheon, Shimmer, Across the Margin, Black Denim Lit, and others. Her short plays have been performed across Colorado Springs. When she's not writing fiction, plays, poetry, or essays, she's creating theater as an ensemble member at Springs Ensemble Theater in Colorado Springs. Jenny will introduce the 3 panelists she has assembled shortly. I should note that these 4 will have complete artistic control of the conversation. That being said, I will slide off screen and let Jenny open up the conversation.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our conversation tonight. I'm very excited to have 3 very talented writers with me to discuss writing strategies in times of crisis. As you all know, COVID-19 has torn through the creative communities, and I really wanted an opportunity for writers to be able to talk about strategies and maybe even some strange triumphs that may have happened during this time. And our first writer is a playwright and novelist. His name is Jonathan Marcantoni, and he can only join us via audio this evening. And Jonathan and I both were directly impacted by COVID. I was doing the lighting design for the play Puerto Rican Nocturne, which was set to open on March 13th. And that's when Colorado decided to shut down. So Jonathan, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do? Perhaps.
Oh, hi. Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, no, sorry, I muted and unmuted myself twice. Well, first of all, let me just say, I didn't know that you had been published by Across the Margin. I'm really good friends with those guys, and I've been writing with them since they first got started. So that's cool that we both have done stuff with them.
See, we have a lot of connections. We should be best friends by the end of this.
Yeah. We should be. We should. I got started in publishing around 2009. Working as an editor for different independent publishers, small presses, and I started writing books. Actually, I grew up doing theater, but then kind of transitioned into doing books, and I've had 5 books published, 1 in Spanish, and it's called Tristiana, and that one was a personal triumph for me because I got to present it internationally. I got to go to the Havana Book Festival in Cuba, which was a crazy experience. But yeah, I also have had a lot of short stories and essays published. I used to write I still do occasionally. I write for Latino Rebels website, and I also have just been kind of moving back into theater. Puerto Rican Nocturne was going to be kind of my coming out in the theater world here locally. And even though that didn't go off the way we wanted it to, me and the actors were able to get together and do a Zoom reading, which we presented. We recorded and presented at Su Teatro in Denver, their WordFest, which is a play reading festival that they changed to being online for this year. And yeah, and I guess I'll talk about the other stuff later. But I've been, I've found this time. Yeah, I've found this time to be very fruitful as a writer. So looking forward to talking about it.
Oh, good. I'm excited to hear about that. Our next panelist is Youre DiSilverio. She is the national best-selling and award-winning author of 21 mystery, suspense, and young adult dystopian novels. She's also the recipient of the Colorado Book Award for mystery. Hi, Youre. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Jenny. Thanks for having me here.
Fantastic. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I think you covered the highlights there. I've been a full-time novelist since I retired from the Air Force in 2004. The first 6 years of that unpublished. I have 4 or 5 manuscripts from that time. My practice manuscripts. My first book came out in 2010 under the name Lila Dare, the Southern Beauty Shop Mysteries, and since then I have published 21 novels. 22 and 23 are in the pipeline. Most of the books are somewhere in the crime fiction spectrum, from cozy mystery to thriller suspense. I also have a young adult dystopian trilogy, the Incubation series, and I'm currently the last book and the current one that I've been working on are women's fiction, kind of trying to transition away from dead bodies into more women's relationships sort of books, book club, fun books, something in the spectrum between book club book and fun beach read.
Yes, I think we all need that now. So
Absolutely.
I'm very excited to hear about those. Our next panelist is Fleur T Bradley. She is a middle grade author. Her 4th book, Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, just released in August. It was the end of August, right?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about yourself, Fleur. Who are you? What do you do?
Well, you kind of summed it up already. I write for kids, so that's what middle grade means in case people aren't familiar. It's for about ages 8 to 12. My very first book was Double Vision. That's this one. And that was a trilogy that I wrote. And this is my 4th book, as Jenny said. It's set in Colorado in a fictional hotel that's kind of modeled after the Stanley Hotel. It's called the Barclay Hotel. I write mysteries. I love mysteries. And this one has a little bit of a spooky element. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right, fantastic. I'm sorry, was that you, Jonathan? I don't know. I hope we didn't just lose him. So, all right. So since we're discussing how COVID has changed our creative processes, first we need to know what our creative process was in the before times. So in 2019 or before, how did you approach writing a project? How did you approach creativity? Did you have rituals? Things like that. Is there anyone who wants to start, or do I get to call on people? All right, I get to call on people. All right, Fleur, you can go first.
Like Laura, I'm a full-time writer, so for me, not that much changed as COVID came about. I was already quarantining at the time because I had heart surgery in January. So I was already not going too many places. I was working, writing, and that was how I kind of did things. And I still do things. I write mostly in the morning and then do sort of the business end in the afternoon. So for me, not much has changed other than what we were discussing a little bit before we started is that it's harder to be social. So it's harder to draw from that interaction with other writers, other creative people that kind of fill the well and make me inspired. So now I have to find those in Zoom meetings, which is a bit more difficult than shaking people's hand. But other than that, the writing process itself for me has not changed a whole lot.
Okay. How about you, Jonathan? I know that one of your projects was immediately interrupted right when the quarantine happened. What did it look like before that, your process? Jonathan?
Yes,
muting is.
I'm here. I'm sorry. I thought you
There.
said Laura at first.
Oh, no.
So no, my whole writing process was definitely very based on like being social and kind of interacting with a lot of people and drawing from different things in the world and in my life. And I certainly also, for me, my writing schedule was never set, which is something that hasn't changed. But I would oftentimes write at night just because my kids would be asleep or I was done with work. I had a lot of late nights writing. But I've always been one of those people that I just kind of write whenever I can. Having a full-time job and also having a bunch of kids, I never could be like, oh, I'm gonna get up at this time and write during these hours. And also I kind of had the big change in the last year of getting divorced, and so that also kind of messed with even before the pandemic even happened. So
Sure.
so I guess in the sense of things just being chaotic, it's really the same.
That's
It's
fair.
just kind of what y'all are saying about the social a lot. Yeah.
Okay. All right. How about you, Laura? What was your process like pre-2020?
PC, pre-COVID. My practice pre-COVID was not dissimilar to Fleur's. Get up early in the morning, walk the dog, have breakfast, get my tea, come down to my office and start working. And I would write for 4 or 5 hours. I generally do at least 2,000 words a day when I'm drafting. And then I would go out and be social. I would go to the gym and work out. I would meet a book group. I would, chair a committee at church or something like that.
Sure.
I would do the businessy end of writing. I would travel on weekends. I would speak to book club groups. I would go to conventions. I would teach seminars. And when we get to the part of the conversation where we talk about what has changed in the creative process, I suspect a lot of you can read between the lines and figure out some of it at least already.
Right. So let's jump into that since we have the pre-processes. How has COVID changed that process? Has it changed your schedule? I know for myself that it's been more of a mental game than necessarily a scheduling process. A lack of social interaction, and having the same things on Netflix all the time. You're just kind of being fed the same thing, so it's hard to percolate some things. So that's where it's been a struggle for me. Laura, how has it affected you?
Well, I could go on for a while. First of all, starting in March, there were people in my writing space. My husband,
yes, that's a real thing.
husband was working from home. My children both came home from college and they were here all day, every day. There were 4 of us in the house all the time. And we all had our private spaces, our offices. We all had things that we had to do. The girls were working on classes. Tom was doing his work thing. But when I'm writing, I'm I want to be focused and I want to be quiet. I don't listen to music. I, log myself off the internet. I have a little program that blocks the internet. I want focus. And the energy in the house is just different when there are 3 other people in it. So that for me was hard to start with. It was hard to focus the way that I was used to focusing. And also, like you say, Jenny, some of the mental stuff. It was just weird. My YA series, my incubation trilogy, was actually about a pandemic, a flu pandemic, and I looked at some of the things that I thought would follow on from that, and I got to go back and rewrite that because I got a lot of it wrong. But it just made me think a lot, and so I didn't really have space in my brain for developing characters and making a plot work. I just had some things I had to sort of think through. So I was distracted. I didn't write for 3 or 4 months. Not actually drafting a novel. I did some revision. I did some businessy kind of stuff, but I wasn't really in that creative space mentally for a bit. And then being kind of a type A sort of person, I needed a project. I needed something to do. And did I sit down and start on a book? No, I adopted a puppy. So I now have a 7-month-old golden doodle puppy named Gus. We got him in early May. And as any of you who are pet owners can probably attest, puppies are time consuming. And active, energetic puppies who think they should be alpha dog are extraordinarily time consuming. So I let him distract me for a bit. And then when we began to get used to him, we decided we needed to sell our house and buy a new one. So for the summer, I was happily distracted by prepping our house for sale and looking at every house available on the market in our price range, and the process of buying and selling a house. So all of this, I think, was a coping mechanism with what was going on. Just needed to practice, needed to process, and needed to distract myself from some some real tragedies in a lot of people's lives. And I recognize that I live in a place of incredible privilege in that we were not financially hurting. My husband still had his job. I still had an Air Force retirement check coming in. Very grateful for that. Very grateful that I did not have young children at home, so that I was trying to balance homeschooling children with having a job of some kind. And very grateful that I did not have to put myself or my family at risk by going out into the workplace during the time when the pandemic was at its height, which I guess might be now instead of a couple months ago. But so being aware of all that, I was still impacted in it, and it hit my writing. And I'll let someone else talk for a bit, but I could talk about how I've adjusted since then at a later time if that comes up.
Okay, yeah, let's chat about the struggles, and then let's move to the overcoming them, like what those strategies were. So Fleur, let's do you next, and then Jonathan, you're on deck, okay? Fleur, what did you struggle with COVID breaking out?
I can echo a bit of what Laura said because my situation's similar, and the grown kids all of a sudden came back. I lost my office, for instance. So I was now kind of out of my normal space, out of my normal routine. And for a creative person, it does help to have the same time, the same place. It helps your brain sort of gear up and be super productive when you need to be. So I kind of lost that. And all of a sudden there's all this noise and people interrupting you when you're working, when there's that focus that you want. So that was a struggle. And I think the best way to overcome, I've been here before, meaning that we at one point lived on a military base, had to homeschool our kids. So that was also a shift from having time to write and time by myself to going to this sort of free-for-all where you had to work whenever time was available, a bit like Jonathan is talking about, being able to write whenever the time presents itself. So I've adapted in that sense a little bit.
So Jonathan, what struggles did COVID present? Yeah.
Well, I think the main struggles I had was kind of in probably the biggest struggle was first adjusting to what was going on in the world. And myself, I'm an essential worker. I work for an electrical company as a technician. So I never got to quarantine. And I actually found, at first, I had different ideas of like how to adjust to it creatively in kind of doing more personal journaling kind of writing, to like assess my feelings and just assess what was going on within me. And I think it set me up to writing much more personal work and even taking a lot more risks, or not risks, but kind of having more introspection in my writing than I had previously. That was personal. I was coming from a personal place, and I found the journaling and writing more like nonfiction kind of pieces really helpful in just kind of getting a grasp on things. And also once I had kind of adjusted to what was going on and to all the changes that our lives have brought us in the pandemic, I actually ended up, well, back in May, just kind of saying to myself, like, I've been wanting to write something completely new, and my job sent me up to Montana for a week, and I was like, the whole time that I'm going to be in Montana and I'm not working, I'm going to write. I'm just going to sit down. I'm just going to bust it out. And I've done stuff like that before, but like not for many, many years. But I just kind of took advantage of the solitude of being in a hotel, to just sit down and bang some things out. But also, with the struggle of all of this adjusting, I also just found that really analyzing the kind of writing I had been doing and the kind of work I had been doing, and figuring out like what I really want to focus on and what I want to do different, what things I want to keep. And so that kind of brought me more into what I'm doing now, where it's like fully playwriting and also, doing like narrative podcasts and radio play kind of stuff. Because I just, I really found that was more calling me than book writing. And I think like without the pandemic, I wouldn't have had that particular thing. But my main struggle, I guess, then was really just at first wrapping my mind around the situation. And then once I figured that out, just kind of went from there.
So the journaling helped you kind of process through that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Is that a practice that you still do?
I have been still doing that, and I just kind of do it stream of conscious. I don't really like format it or anything. I bought a few journals, and I do it handwritten.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of find that like the more raw something is, like I respond to it better handwriting it, and yeah, like it's really helped me through this whole period.
Great. Have there been any other strategies that you've used to kind of get yourself in that mental, creative space? Because I know that you write for theater, and I know that you are in Anna Devere Smith's play House Arrest at Theater Works. Has getting invested in the arts helped as well?
Yeah, like any kind of connection to different projects people are doing. I think one of the reasons why I've thrown myself so much back into like the theatrical and performance world is is because of how active and interactive it's been. And that definitely has helped. I mean, just kind of trying out different creative juices, but also, I mean, for me, like one of my biggest strategies with writing is music. Like I kind of make soundtracks for the things that I'm writing, and listen to like the same songs over and over again, like while I'm working on it. So music, also some wine helps. I'm not gonna lie, but no, like, but definitely like music and just I don't know. For me, maybe it's because I've gotten so used to being a writer with a family. Like noise and chaos doesn't bother me. Like I actually, sometimes it's harder for me to write when it's quiet.
Sure. No,
And sometimes not. I mean, sometimes I can, but I'm definitely more of an agent of chaos in the way that I write.
that's great. Laura, what now we can talk about your strategies and how you overcame along with your, golden doodle.
Yeah, not yet overcome Gus. A variety of things. I finally just decided, okay, enough is enough. Recognized that I had been distracting myself with busyness from thinking about sort of what was going on in the world, and decided it was just time to sit my butt back down in the chair and get to work. So luckily the one daughter is back at college now, learning online at the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, where apparently they have lots and lots of COVID cases, but she's staying in. My husband is still home, but we've kind of separated out our spaces. So I have reclaimed a quiet space. Unlike Jonathan, I got to have my quiet. I've sort of set working hours again. Now, what I'm not doing, and probably should be, is, or not, the business end of it. I have not been marketing. I have not been on Facebook. It's just not where my head is right now. I needed to get back into the writing. I needed to get back into that process of creation. And perhaps a good place to say right now that I'm so very grateful that I'm an artist who does not need a live audience. So many artists right now, as you well know, Jenny, are unable to practice their craft except in very constrained ways because they need a public space of some kind. So I'm very grateful that I can still write, I can still create in this time of pandemic. Like Jonathan, I've done some thinking about what is it I want to write. I finished up the book I was working on, sent it to my agent. She got me comments. I revised on that and sent that book back off to her on Friday. So I'm now in the creative space of what am I going to write next. And I've been thinking about whether I want that to be influenced heavily by the pandemic, by the social environment that we're in now, by new experiences of isolation, living life differently, or whether I want to do something more lighthearted. What does the world need right now? I suspect there are probably a lot of very serious and far more talented writers than I am who are taking a serious look at what the pandemic and isolation and being with people only on Zoom and not getting hugs and not seeing your elderly relatives because they're imprisoned in nursing homes for great lengths of time. I suspect there are a lot of people who will be mining that to great effect for several years to come. So I'm really leaning more toward the humorous kind of book, a more lighthearted thing, positive, hopeful, probably women's fiction again, although I do have kind of an idea for a humorous detective series in mind. So we'll see where I come down on that. But keys have been discipline, just making myself get back to my routine regardless of the disruptions in my household, kind of lock my office door, so no dogs, no children, no husband, and I'll leave it up to you guys to guess which one needs assistance most often. Hint, it's not the dog. And just to try to keep my mind in a space that is creative. I go for long walks. The new neighborhood has lots of trails, so try to get out and clear my head. I've just realized talking to you guys this evening that one thing I am missing is the company of other writers. Not able to go to conferences, not able to go speak at, Sisters in Crime sessions or to teach in person. And I'm missing that. That's a source of support and also creativity in and of itself. So I'm going to have to find a way to hang out with people like you guys more often via Zoom. We could bring a bottle of wine next time.
There you go. I like it. So you bring up an interesting thing, and I'm going to throw it to Fleur. Haha. So there is a lot of upheaval going on, and it's an election year. Everything is really stressful, regardless of what side of the fence that you're on. How do you silence the outside world, which we're not touching anymore, but is still affecting us? How do you create the mental space to create?
I turn off the internet.
Yes,
that's been super helpful.
Not until 8 o'clock.
Okay,
After the conversation, then.
I think you bring up a good point, is that you have to kind of put yourself in a bubble. And that's what I had to learn. I think most of us, when the pandemic first hit, there's that shock of your environment has changed, your life has changed, you're watching the numbers, or at least I was watching the numbers every day, and it doesn't help you. And you get to a point where you're thinking, okay, this is the status quo now. We're talking about crisis, but really we need to find a new normal in all of it. In my case, I had no choice. I was working on the next book, which had a deadline. So to some extent I had to work, which was a good thing. Midnight at the Barclay Hotel came out in August, and I had no choice but to promote it. And for us children's book writers, a lot of that depends on going out on school visits, going out to conventions like Laura talks about, because that's the only way a book is going to get discovered and it gets sold, quite frankly, because you need to make a living off of this, or at least my living is off of books. So to some extent, I had to force myself to work. I had to force myself to sit down and just go and do it and get over myself. And I started small, for those of you out there who are creative people and maybe struggle now and maybe go, you know what, I don't know how to do it. Shut off the internet, which is a good thing, just to kind of get yourself away from all that chaos and just start small. And that's how I started back up and got back to writing and was able to write what I'm just about done with the next book, because that's due and life goes on and things will get published again. And, even in my case, the book still came out and I had to find reviewers and I had to find ways to do school visits and find out, okay, who's in person and who is doing Zoom visits. You have to adapt to some extent. As much as you want to protect yourself from that environment, you also have to kind of get over yourself and just accept that, hey, this is what's here now, and adapt and overcome. And there's beautiful side effects to it, I think, too, is that right now we're discussing things right from our home, which is wonderful. This past weekend, I went to an online convention, VoucherCon, which would have been in Sacramento. I would not have gone probably because the cost and the travel is not quite worth it for a children's book writer like me, but I love mysteries. So I love that convention. I love hearing about what's happening in mystery and what new books are out. And I was able to go to that convention, even though it's via Zoom. I still got to see some of my old friends and connect with people in a way that is meaningful within the limitations that we just have right now. And they'll probably be here for a while. So we have to try to find a new normal in it.
So you mentioned having to figure out new ways to do school visits and to do conferences. So in some ways, COVID has created this environment of sharing. It's very different because I know that I've gone to a couple conferences and workshops, things that I wouldn't have been able to afford or attend had, you know, the world continued as it was. So what are some surprisingly positive things that have come from this? I'm going to throw it to Jonathan, and I'm going to give you a second to unmute.
Yeah, I'm here.
So what are some positive things?
Yeah, so some positive. So you want to know some positive things that have come from this?
Yeah, things that surprised you that were surprisingly positive.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear us?
I think yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I just I'm sorry. I think there might be a little bit of a delay, but you know, I think the thing that's been a positive surprise, the thing that's been a positive surprise has been how quickly artistic people have adapted to the different technological constraints and also adapted to the changing situation of the pandemic, of how we can actually congregate with one another, or do like a show safely. You know, like once it got into summertime, like doing things outdoors and figuring out the whole social distancing guidelines, and just working within whatever boundaries got thrown at us, and still staying connected, still putting on shows, still creating content. Um, and so just the resilience, the resilience, and also the continued community and the adaptation, like just the fact that we have, even though the first like month or two definitely felt very like hopeless, then just, you know, we stopped feeling sorry for ourselves and just went forward to make what we could. And that resilience has been just a really pleasant surprise. And probably, you know, the most positive thing that has come out of all of this, just in general.
So I agree. I've seen a lot of resiliency as well. How about you, Laura?
There have been several things, especially in the early days of the pandemic, March, April, May. You know, everything dropped off our calendars, right? All the in-person activities, all the community meetings, the committees, the children's sports events, the what have yous. And I found myself with the opportunity to really sit and think, to relax a little, to let some of the stress of the crowded calendar drain away. And I hadn't realized before that just how much mental energy I was spending on things that maybe turns out aren't that important to me. And so that was very helpful, I think, to be able to just sit, to take that time to look at my calendar every morning and go, ah, there's nothing on it, nothing at all. Also gave me the chance to read some more, some things that I have not gotten around to reading for a while. My TBR pile that was several feet high gave me a chance to take a breather. And I realized that's not the experience everyone has had, but that was something that I was able to get a positive from. And the other thing is that some of that time where I would otherwise have spent running around, going to the grocery store, running errands, all the things that I no longer do, shopping, I have spent catching up with friends. The technology that I have discovered, that a lot of us, I think, have discovered, the Zooms and that sort of thing. I've spent a fair amount of time each week now talking to friends who don't live in the area, and reconnecting with them. And that's been a very, very positive thing. And I realize that neither of these are necessarily directly connected to the creative life and where I am with that, but I suspect there's a tie back to that somewhere. And I'm going to fight very hard as the world returns to normal, if it returns to anything that we would call normal from PC, to protect my time and my mental space a little more, and to protect my friendships and relationships, and really, really spend some time working on those.
So one thing that I was thinking of is that everyone here is pretty professional, has already set up, like it's a career for most of us. So what are some tips and tricks that someone who does not have the professional background yet, who wants to create and tell stories, what are, let's see, I'll give you a limit. What are 2 things that you would like to tell this beginning writer, this pre-published writer, how to proceed with their processes in this crazy time? And I'll throw that to Fleur first.
Gosh.
We get 2 things, and no one can repeat.
2 things. Okay. First, and whenever I go somewhere, people, and they hear that I'm a writer, they'll go, "Oh, I have this great idea for a book, and I want to be a writer, but I don't have the time." And it used to annoy the heck out of me because I always thought it was such a rude answer, thinking that, oh, I must have tons of time to be a writer. But actually what it says is, in order to be a writer, you have to give something up. So you have to give up a bit of your time for every time you sit down and write. So if you're just starting out, if maybe you're having a hard time with all this going on, maybe you have a day job, children at home. I was in that situation once where I had to all these things and I still wanted to be creative. It's something that you give to yourself that time. So carve out, even if you do half an hour, that's a page maybe that you write. And it could be total garbage, that's okay. In the beginning, allow yourself to get comfortable with that routine. Take a half an hour a day. If you can watch a Netflix show, if you have time for that, you have time to write. So write just a little bit. And whatever it is, it doesn't have to be good, because that's what editing is for. And that's how you learn. So if you're starting out, start with that. Just carve out a little bit of time. And then my second bit of advice is to try to find some friends, which right now is kind of hard. But there are online writing groups. There are places to connect with writers. And I think Jenny's going to go over that towards the end a little bit, some of the resources. But try to find some people that are like you, that are just starting out and just learning, because you can kind of inspire each other. I have a close group of writer friends that are at the same level as I am, and we can kind of tell each other, okay, this is what's going on, and you can kind of keep each other going as far as trying to meet the goals that you have. So those are my 2 bits of advice.
Jonathan, 2 pieces of advice for beginning writers who may not have your experience yet.
I would say the first one. At first, I want to say I really liked Fleur's advice as well. I would say, to build on that, this is the time to really try on anything. Don't get too stuck in either stuff that you've heard in writing classes or read in writing books of this is the way you do this, this is the way you do that. This is a time where everything is changing, and where opportunities are going to be presented that weren't around before. Also, and that's especially true for writers of color. I mean, being a Puerto Rican writer myself, I have been told just for years, well, you can't write about this thing, you can't write about that thing, or, you can only get published if you cover these topics, and that's it. And it's been very limited. But this is a time where if you're a writer of color, there are so many different outlets that are wanting your perspective and are wanting to represent you. And so, you know, it's like a producer friend of mine was like, you know, take advantage of white guilt in this moment because there's a lot of it. And so if you're a writer of color, just go for it. You know, hey, this is my story. I know it's going to be unconventional, but whatever. This is like you're wanting somebody like me. So here you go. This is the way I tell stories. And I think that more than any time before COVID, this is the time to take advantage of that. So if you're getting started, don't limit yourself. And the second piece of advice would be to view writing as self-care. That whether you're writing something that is realistic and deeply personal, or writing something that is genre friendly, and I mean, and genre writing can be very deeply personal too. But if you're doing something that, you know, is more along the lines of fantasy worlds or sci-fi.
I think we lost you a little bit there, Jonathan. That's a shame. That felt like that was a good piece of advice coming. So, Laura, what are your two pieces?
Piece one is do what Fleur said, and piece two is do what Jonathan said.
Cheating.
I'll put yeah, oh, darn. I'm a writer, I'm allowed to cheat. I'm allowed to make things up. I would say, kind of to riff off what Fleur said, you're only a writer if you write. And so the most important thing is to sit your butt down in the chair with your pen or your pencil or your computer or your audio recorder or whatever it is, and actually get that wonderful idea in your head down on paper. Because to my mind, that is the biggest distinction between wannabe writers with hugely wonderful ideas, which indeed they may have, and published writers who may have less good ideas, but they sat their butts down and wrote. So, you know, as Fleur suggested, find the time that works for you, whether that's, you know, midnight after you have the children in bed, whether that's at 5 in the morning before you go off to a day job. I used to do that when I was in the Air Force. And set yourself a goal, whether that's 1 page, whether it's 5 pages, whether it's a word count. You're going to do 1,000 words, you're going to do 500 words, whatever it is, and commit to actually doing it. Then you're a writer. The second piece of advice I would have is to read, and to read widely. You know, Jonathan said, don't hem yourself in with what you're writing. I would say the same thing about reading, because you will pick up tips and ideas and get your imagination going by reading the widest variety of things possible. So if you normally read mysteries, take a flyer on a sci-fi or a fantasy novel and see what's going on over there. And if you normally read romances, go find, you know, an old Lovecraft book or a Stephen King or something else, and just read as widely as possible, taking note of some of the techniques that the writers are using to develop character, to keep the pacing up, to make you interested in the book. And I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to add a third thing, which is, if you want to be a writer, start with the writing. Don't be spending your time initially on building a website and designing your bookmarks and figuring out where you're going to have your first book signing. All that is wonderful, and I sincerely hope that you get to the point in your career where that is all applicable. But unless you got a manuscript, and a damn good manuscript, all of that is wasted time. It's your puppy. It's your new house. It's the distraction from what you ought to be doing. So do the writing first, and the rest of that will come in its own time.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so I just have a couple more questions. So the next one is trying to find resources. And there are a few really, really good ones locally. Obviously, we are, with the Cultural Office of the Pikes Peak region, so that's number one. Do you have any resources that you would recommend to writers? I have a few in case you don't have any.
Who are you asking?
Anyone. You go, Laura. Sorry. I should have called.
Well, then you are a volunteer. I mean, there's a bunch online. There's a bunch in person. Pikes Peak Writers is a wonderful, wonderful resource here in town with monthly activities, seasonal activities, and one of the best writing conventions, conferences in the country every April generally. I would also suggest some online sources. Career Authors is a wonderful one, regardless of where you are in your writing journey. If you consider yourself someone who is or will be a professional author, there's an awful lot there to ponder and to help you with pretty much any aspect of the writing life, from the craft of the writing itself to the publishing process and the marketing, which you're not thinking about until you already have a complete manuscript.
Great. Fleur?
Well, I'm coming from the children's book writing angle, so I'll talk about that a little bit. There's an organization called SCPWI, and I believe it's .org for the website. It's the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which is a mouthful, just to talk about all the people that write children's book, anything from picture books to YA, and the illustrators that illustrate picture books and graphic novels as well. So that's an organization that has local chapters. We have a chapter here in the Pikes Peak region, the Rocky Mountain chapter that goes quite a few states north still to us as well. But they have local events, and they're super helpful when you're not published yet. I waited until I was published to join, and that was a mistake, really, because there's just a ton of programs and mentor opportunities that you can use for that. And I'll add also for us local people, I noticed that a lot of the libraries are having some pretty amazing events. I believe the Aurora Library has, and I'm just kind of saying that off the cuff, I didn't check to see what the website is, but they have several author readings. They were even giving away some books to people who were coming to these things and book clubs, and they're really trying to be active and really embracing this time where we can't go in person, so we're all taking it to the web. And what's awesome about that is that, of course, anybody from anywhere can attend. So those are some great resources. Just kind of look around and see what people are talking about, and listen to some of the authors that are out there that you might otherwise not be able to hear because, any other time they would be at a location that you might not be able to go to, whereas now you can go online and join right in, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I'm going to second the Pikes Peak Writers, which the website went across. And I did want to let you know that their next event is also virtual. It's Writers Night. It's Monday night. So if you go to their website or if you visit their Facebook page, you'll have the information to join via Zoom. And Writers Nights are fantastic ways to meet other writers in the city and also pick the brains of more experienced writers like Laura and Fleur. I think both of them may have presented at Writers Nights before. Another group, Pikes Peak Library District. Always visit your library and their calendar. All Pikes Peak Reads is going on right now, so you can read along with other people as well. And then the very last group that I'm just going to pitch out there tonight is amazing. It's Poetry 719. They actually have started their poetry festival. I think it's a 3 or 4 day festival. Don't quote me. Go to their website, poetry719.com, and they have so many events. So if you're a poet, this is the group that you want to take a look at. Their festival actually started an hour ago, and I think there's another event right after this. So if you go to their Facebook page or you go to their website, you can join them right after you see this. Okay, so the last piece that I have, we actually lost contact with Jonathan, so I unfortunately don't have his information, but please tell us very briefly where we can find you and your work. Laura. Sorry.
Find me and my work at DiSilverio.com. That's the best place to start. You can email me from there. I hope you drop by, and please do email me. I respond to all of them, and it's been lovely to be here and chat with everybody today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Fleur, where can we find you? You're muted.
See, I was going to do it at least one. It's ftbradleycom. So that's where you can find all about me and my books. I have some teacher guides in case you were an educator for my book Midnight at the Barclay Hotel. You can also see what events I'll be at. So.
Okay. Fantastic. And I'm going to head it back to Jonathan Tillman.
Well, hello, Jenny.
Hello. Welcome.
Long time no see. Thank you all for this lovely conversation, Jenny, Laura, Fleur, and Jonathan as well. Though we lost him toward the end from the mobile writing lab that Jonathan was in this evening. Really appreciate your time, and you know, I love the conversation about using writing to adjust, adapt, heal. Because that's what the power of the arts can do for us in general, and I thought that was really helpful. So thank you again for this conversation this evening. The next community conversation, you won't have to wait long. It's tomorrow afternoon, October 22nd at 3 p.m. We'll have the role of intersectionality within the arts community, and that'll be hosted by Ashley Cornelius, who is the co-director of Poetry 719. We hope you'll join us then. In the meantime, info on all 8 community conversations can be found at artsoctober.com, and that'll help you learn about Arts Month beyond the community conversations as well, to see what else is happening here in the Pikes Peak region during October. Thanks again for joining us this evening, and remember to have at least one new cultural experience, virtual or in person, in 2020 with family or friends this October.